Hi there folks, hope you're all keeping well. Just want to say first of all, really well done on your initial work on conservatism. Some really excellent, well thought out answers, and some of that detail is going to be required as we move forward into dealing with some very complex political issues. So first of all, just want to say really well done. The purpose of this video is to talk a wee bit about theorists and the general importance of theorists throughout the political theory section. When you start to write essays in higher politics, you will be capped at certain amounts of marks if you do not include reference to political theorists. Now, in conservatism, there's actually a range of theorists that we can talk about. There's two that we've not actually looked at in any real detail at all. Roger Scruton, who passed away last year, and also Michael Oakeshott, who I would definitely check out. I've not spoken a great deal about him within the PowerPoint or anything like that, but it's someone that you should absolutely check out if you really want to get a sense of the importance of conservative ideas. Now, one of the questions was about Thomas Hobbes's book Leviathan. This is the idea of a mythical sea creature that, swallows full ships whole and all the rest of it. And its purpose was to be a sort of analogy to the state, what conservatives believe the state should actually be. It should be a powerful entity that has the ability to impose limitations on the worst excesses of human experience and human activity, but it should not be something that is interfering. It's not something that should look to control people's lives. It should be something that is a discipline. It's something that imposes order, and that's the purpose of the state. Thomas Hobbes's book Leviathan was arguably the most important book ever written in politics, although there are many who would disagree with that. Now, one of the other theorists that I mentioned in my previous video that I think most of you should make reference to, you should absolutely make reference to this when you're talking about society generally, and that's the work of Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke writes directly after the French Revolution about how much the French Revolution was a mistake. It's not that Edmund Burke didn't think that changes were required in France. The church had grown too powerful, government had grown so corrupt. But the purpose of change did not serve the people ultimately. And Edmund Burke argued that when you try to completely upend and completely overthrow institutions and traditions that had been long established, it will spell nothing but disaster for society. So he says that, conservatives shouldn't be resistant to change. They should be resistant to change that is unnecessary. Some change will be necessary. But when you really think about it, society is built in an organic way, and restructuring it in a very fast way in which the French Revolution embodied should be avoided at all costs. When the French try to restart the calendar from scratch, when they try to redo the saints' days, that is not something that could be compatible with an organic society. So please make sure that you reference Edmund Burke for conservatism when you look at society generally. One of the other theorists that I think you absolutely should mention, and this person isn't really a theorist in the traditional sense of the word, but he is someone who spoke to a great deal of conservative thought, and that was Benjamin Disraeli. In the 19th century, there was a great battle between two key politicians, William Gladstone, who became a Liberal eventually, and Disraeli, who was a Conservative. And Benjamin Disraeli spoke in great depth about how Victorian society had become like two separate countries, a rich country and a poor country. And he felt that in order to keep one nation, it was the responsibility of those at the top of society to look out for those at the bottom. Not in a way that would suggest helping people up. I often reference Winston Churchill's view. He says, if you throw, if a man is drowning, you don't go and drag him out the water. What you do is you throw something to help him get out the water. And that's approaching an idea of one nation conservatism. It isn't just, I'm all right, Jack. It's about saying we understand that there are different elements within society that we need to look out for. And what I would really stress is that when we look at One Nation Conservatives, we'll look for their social policies. Do they look to improve social cohesion between the rich and the poor, between the privileged and the not so privileged? Do they promote that? Now, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, David Cameron all felt as though they were One Nation Conservatives, and they sought to base their government on that. Margaret Thatcher thought the exact opposite. She said that One Nation Conservatism was basically No Nation Conservatism, that ultimately you should not be inhibiting the creativity and the entrepreneurial spirit that an individual has. And if someone's poor, it's their own fault. They should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I am generalising a wee bit there, folks, but Margaret Thatcher was quite hostile to that idea of One Nation Conservatism, whereas Johnson, May and Cameron have stressed that they feel as though they are One Nation Conservatives. Now, in your classwork, you should be looking at Theresa May and making a judgment on Theresa May. Look at the video of David Cameron, look at the video of Boris Johnson introducing the prospectus, and maybe have a look at the Conservative Party manifesto of 2015, of 2017 and of 2019, and ask yourselves, is there any policy within this, or are there a set of policies within this which embody the notions of One Nation Conservatism? This idea of One Nation is often seen as a slightly less harsh or less abrasive approach to conservatism. It's a softer element. It looks at the soft side. It looks at the more considerate side of conservatism. Whereas people often thought Thatcher was quite harsh in her approach at times. But what you've got to decide here is, how valid are Disraeli's views? Make sure that you're quoting or referencing the work of Disraeli. Look at how these three politicians, Johnson, Cameron, May, have they embodied that as you go throughout this? Is One Nation Conservatism something that really works? I mean, we spoke about George Osborne when we looked at the idea of property and him introducing the Help to Buy scheme. Is that One Nation Conservatism? Is that the state? Is that the wealthy playing a better role? One of the things you should look at, though, when you're looking at One Nation, is look at David Cameron's idea of the big society involving voluntary organisations, not the state doing things for people, but encouraging the voluntary sector, encouraging philanthropy where possible. And if I was to ask a number of historians, like David Starkey, for example, about how Boris Johnson is looking to define himself, Boris Johnson has spoken a lot about supporting the north of England, traditionally Labour heartlands that voted for Johnson in 2019. David Starkey would argue that he stands in the tradition, or is trying to stand in the tradition, of Disraeli. So, crucially, folks, I want you to think about the theorists. Make sure you bring them in. When we come to socialism, we'll talk about Karl Marx. We'll talk about John Maynard Keynes. We'll talk about more moderate versions of socialism, the New Labour Project, Anthony Giddens, and others like him. But I want you to really make sure that you are quoting or referencing those theorists, because remember, that's what will really lend credibility to your argument. So make sure that by the end of this week, folks, we have finished the work on conservatism, and especially that idea of One Nation Conservatism. And if I can get you to go back and go into your notes that you have taken, I know I've marked them, but if you can make some references to Edmund Burke when it comes to society, and Benjamin Disraeli, and some examples like Johnson, Cameron and May were relevant when it comes to paternalism and the importance of the state. One last point I want to mention, folks, is that there is one aspect that I didn't cover in conservatism, really. I spoke about it in my last video very briefly, and that was economy. I will take down the conservatism PowerPoint and I will re-upload it so that you can answer those questions for aspect 5. Now, in an essay, you won't necessarily need 5 aspects, but it's an important comparison to use because economy plays a particular big role in socialism. And when you compare conservatism to socialism, that can be really helpful. So, just want to thank you again for your work so far. It is really important that we're staying engaged and that we're staying working. And please give me your opinions, guys. One of the things that I've loved about teaching higher politics over the last couple of years is the engagement, and it's the debates and it's the discussions that we've had. Please make sure that you do that. We're all feeling a wee bit isolated here, and it'd be good to see some of that debate going. That's what politics is all about. You can leave a comment. If you want to upload a video, you're welcome to do so like this. But please take care, and any questions you've got, please get in touch. Keep working hard and keep referencing those theorists. Take care. Bye-bye.